So you can see how much that it was leaking. Now, just before I preach again, we read Mark 3, 1 through 13. Verse 13 says, "And he goeth up into a mountain." Now, this passage does not tell us which mountain that it was, but there is a mountain right beside Galilee. The name of that mountain is Mount Arabel, and it is not mentioned in Scripture, but it is a very prominent mountain. It is about all that you can see when you're on the Sea of Galilee, and I went up on top of that mountain. I looked down. It was a very beautiful sight, and I'm thinking when I read verse 13 that maybe the mountain that he went up into was Mount Arabel, and it was a very aromatic in climate. The climate was just great there. And so that gives you a little sight for that. That was what I was thinking when I saw verse 13 there. Let's get back to our series on emotions. I will finish up what I started last week with just one point or so about emotional empathy. And then we will continue on with the ABCs of emotions. And it is my goal to wrap this up at the end of this month. And that will be 6 months that we have been dealing with emotions. And it hit me that we have so many different kind of emotions that I could probably preach on this one topic for the rest of my life. But I will not do that. I will select something else to start out July as we will look at, and I will tell you about that 2 weeks from today when I get back, if the Lord has impressed upon my heart. I've got one topic that I am thinking about, but I will not tell you what that is right now, but I will let you know if I feel that is the direction that we need to go in. Now, last week I dealt with emotional empathy. Let me get a running start on that, just a little bit of where we left off last time. Many people are clueless when it comes to our emotions, and we don't want to understand our perspective or other people's perspectives on this issue. We want to think about ourselves many, many times. And so we need to get to understand that. That is why I have always said that I like to step out of my own choir and consider other people's ideas on things. A few minutes ago, I told you about our local talk show host that I have dealt with for almost 30 years now, and I told you a little bit about his agnosticism. And I have talked with him at length about that, and I am very fascinated as to how he came upon that. You can do that by walking a little bit in a person's shoes. And so I will ask a person, how did you come upon that philosophy? And sometimes what they say to you, you can understand how they have that perspective. You may not ever agree with that, but you can understand their perspective on things a whole lot better when you walk a little bit in their shoes and you can see their perspective on things. I have talked with people sometimes that have told me that they had very cruel parents, or they had a very emotionally weak parents, or they had a parent that was mental, and that has affected them. Now, you can understand that. For an example, I never grew up in a home where there was alcoholic beverages in the refrigerator. And I had a mom and dad that were very much against me ever drinking alcoholic beverages, and that is really not a problem with me because of that. But a person that grew up with a parent that was a drunk, and they had a lot of alcohol in the refrigerator, they have to struggle even more with alcoholism because it was right there. Now, a person might have a different kind of struggle just because they have dealt with things differently. Like I have told you, sometimes I have a problem with faith, wanting to know that I have enough money in the bank to pay a bill that is on my desk. That has been a besetting sin that I have dealt with. Now, a person that has dealt with pornography, maybe it is best that he doesn't go to a convenience store where there are racks of pornographic magazines. Now, in the state of Virginia, those things have to be put under the counter, and that helps, but there are some states where it is out in the open, and you can understand that. So how well do we understand other people's perspectives? Do you ever find yourself thinking, what was the person thinking or feeling? I will watch the news a couple of times a day, and because I drive on average about 100 miles a day, I am always listening to talk radio and news talk radio and things like that. And I am up on a lot of the current news because of that. And I hear stories about things that happen, and I'm wondering, what was that person thinking? I told you a story last week about a police officer in the peninsula that was driving drunk and also recklessly, and they were a police officer in Portsmouth. And when that police officer was arrested, that police officer began to fight and kick the other officer. And I'm thinking, what is that person thinking? They have just lost their career because of what they did there. And of course, we have not heard the outcome of that. And being in law enforcement for almost 30 years now, I was thinking, what was that person thinking? I have worked very hard for 30 years to stay out of IA, and I have done that. I have never been to IA because of something that I have done, but I have been to IA 2 or 3 times because I was with another officer that didn't handle himself correctly, and they called me in and said, what did you see of that officer? And so I began to think, what was that officer thinking to do something like that? So how well do we understand other people's perspective? How do they view things? How is being clueless of feelings on other person's perspective? You begin to think, well, you've got an excuse, but that doesn't really solve the problem. We've got to deal with our own emotions, and the problem is that sometimes we have to deal, whether we want to or not, with other people's emotions. If you've got somebody in your family that is emotionally unstable, fill in the blank, you've got to deal with it. And it is a whole lot different if you live under the same roof than if that person lives on the West Coast. But you still have to deal with that. And you get telephone calls from family members, and they will tell you, did you see what Aunt Harriet did? Now, I don't think anybody here has an Aunt Harriet. I just picked that name out of the sky. But you understand what I'm saying. So I'm attuned to others, not emotionally tone deaf. I have the ability to sense other people's moods. There are some people that are like that, and some people are not. And I said that is a problem with much of our social media culture today. A person cannot put what they were intending on an emotional post, like in Facebook. There have been times that I have intended and put something as a comment on Facebook, a post, and people have taken it all whiches of ways. And when it gets done, it's not anything like what I intended, and somebody else will comment on what another person says, and it's a long, long thread, and I'm saying, good grief, that's not what I intended. And so we need to sense another person's mood. Will you put something on social media that you would not say to their face? It's a lot easier to put something in an email and hit send than talking to somebody to their face. Now, it has all happened to us, and there have been times that has happened to me. I will respond to an email that I get from the police department, and I will hit the wrong button, and I will hit reply all instead of reply to that one person. Reply all, it will go to everybody in the police department. And that was one time a couple of years ago that I accidentally hit reply all, and I heard from a captain. He said, Don, please don't tell everybody your reply to one person. I said, well, I didn't mean to. It was a mistake. I'm sorry. And so we need to realize that sometimes people will say things electronically that they would not say to your face. We have empathy built on self-awareness. I'm open to my own emotions and therefore skilled in reading the feelings of others. Don't you love people that will tell you that they're open-minded? There was one time I had somebody years ago that sent me an email that says, I'm open-minded and therefore you are not, so I am going to unfriend and block you. Think about that statement. Obviously, you're only open-minded with people that think like you do. And so realize that that can be a problem as well. Do you practice the creative ability of perceiving the subjective experiences of others? Sometimes we have experiences that will color the way that we see things. Now, I don't unfriend somebody on social media because they see things differently than I do. But I have unfriended people 2 or 3 times that accuse me of something that is not accurate, and I don't want other people to see that. There was one time a person accused me of sexual molestation just because I was a Baptist pastor. They had been abused as a child, and it was in a Baptist church, and so that person thought that all Baptist pastors were abusers. And so I unfriended that one person because I did not want that, of course, to get out. It was incorrect. But do we understand a person that has experiences that they deal with? This is a big one. Do we make another person's pain our own? Sometimes I have had a burden with a person that shares a burden with me. And in the 30 years that I've had to make notifications to people, most of the time I am dealing with a person that I have never met and I don't know. And so that helps me a lot in my mind to think, I don't know this person and nothing of their life intersects with mine. And so therefore, it is not a thing for me. But last November, I had to make notification to the parents of one of our homicide detectives that committed suicide. And I had known him for 25 years. And it was very, very hard. And even still to this day, I struggle with the emotions that I feel of having to deal with this. A couple of months ago, I knocked on that same door, and I said, "How you doing?" And I had a few moments with the Father. He was a believer, and so we had a word of prayer. And I said, "If you ever need me, please give me a call." And it is my plan, if I can remember, to knock on that door again on the 1-year anniversary of that suicide. So we need to understand how people are painful and feeling that. Here's another thing. I can take on the perspective of another person. In doing that, it removes us from only thinking of ourselves. Think about it. Sometimes when I have a little pain, all I am thinking about is that little pain. Last night, this bruise was beginning to swell just a little bit, and my wife said, "Put an ice pack on it." So I sat on the couch and I had an ice pack so it wouldn't get any larger. And because of that pain, this is about all that I was thinking about. And so sometimes when we have a perspective all of our own, that is all that we are thinking about. We're thinking about our problems rather than somebody else's problems. And that is very, very hard, because to us, what we are dealing with is very, very real to us. Let's think about it. If you have a car crash, if you are involved in a crash, that is all that you are thinking about for that moment, and the insurance and whatnot, and maybe you wake up the next morning, your back hurts and whatnot. But a friend of yours that lives in California, they're not really concerned about how you are feeling about that. They might say, "Well, I'm sorry," but do they really feel about that? So our EQ or our IQ, we'll call this the emotional quotient. This is just as important as how smart we are, our IQ. At times in Christian circles, we act as if emotions are the black sheep of the image of God's family. God created us with intellect, but He also created us with emotions. He didn't want us to be apart from that. Some of the very people who tend to downplay the value of emotions seem to struggle with the emotional empathy that we are focusing on. When we focus exclusively on our rationality, we end up focusing exclusively on ourselves. And that was just what I was talking about. We see life and situations and conflicts only from our own mental perspectives. We fail to see life and its situations and conflicts from the emotional and mental perspectives of other people, because we are emotionally tone deaf to them. Rather than hindering our rational ability to understand people, we need to build relationships. We need to resolve conflict. Emotional empathy is a vital God-given tool for working well with others and for living with others with Christ's love. We need to be attuned to others. We need to have empathy built on self-awareness. We need to learn to practice the creative ability of perceiving the subjective experiences of others. We need to make other people's pain our own. And I can take on the perspective of another person. That is very hard for me because I am thinking about the things that I need to do. I need a rack and pinion for the van. I need to replace the air conditioner condenser on my Ford Focus, and I got that in about 2.5 weeks ago, and I have not had time to do that job. And the fence, I found a few of the panels of my fence were rotted, and so I had to replace those the last couple of days. And I'm not much of a carpenter. I can't even cut a straight line with a laser saw. That's why I've got Wayne around. And Wayne can't really fix cars much, but I can help him and he can help me. But all I had to do was go to Lowe's and get some fence panels and put them up. And when I got done on Friday night, I was 3 or 4 panels short. And so I've got to go Monday or Tuesday and get another few pickets to finish up what I was doing. And being having OCD so bad, I put up a few of those pickets on Friday, and I stood back and I looked, and they were just a little bit off. And so I had to unscrew them to my satisfaction and put them back up. And that's a problem. So it took me all evening, and there's still a place where there are 4 pickets that aren't there. And that bothers me. As I was driving out of my garage this morning, I saw the hole in the fence, and that bothered me, and I can't wait to get that. Maybe I'll have a chance tomorrow afternoon to stop by Lowe's. We'll see. Now, talking about emotional intelligence, the EQ of things, we need to learn the ABCs of emotional maturity. Christians tend to be kindergartners when it comes to emotional maturity. That's why we need to learn the ABCs of emotional maturity. There have been times that the kindergarten teacher at Tabernacle will ask me to come and address their class in uniform, and I have done that, but I learned very quickly as I was finishing up never to ask kindergartners, do you have any questions? Because those little kids will raise their hands and they'll make statements rather than asking questions. There was one day, I don't even remember who it was, that a little kid raised their hand, and I said, "What is your question?" And they said, "Well, there was one time that I saw a police car driving up our street." And that's not a question, that's a statement. And so sometimes we as adult Christians will act like a kindergartner in dealing with things that are much more important. So A, how our emotions are a value to us. B, how are our emotions of value to others. And C, how can we practice the hallmarks of being emotionally mature. How our emotions are of value to us. It is a God-given warning light. Emotions serve as God-given dummy lights. We know what dummy lights are like on our dash. I would rather know exactly what the voltage is that my engine is putting out rather than not having a voltage meter and just having a dummy light that will come on when it senses that there is not enough voltage. My Ford Focus did not have a voltage meter on it, and that was driving me crazy. So we used to call them cigarette lighters, or they're power plugs now. We don't have cigarette lighters. I got one that when you plug it in, it will automatically give you the voltage of what the engine is saying. So now at any time when the engine is running, I can see what the voltage is. And so that is a big, big help to me. But dummy lights are a flashing red light on our dash that says to us, "Hey, dummy, you better prop the hood because something is haywire in your car." What about the check engine lights? A couple of years ago, my wife and I were headed to Greenville, South Carolina. And we got to Emporia, and the check engine light came on the van. And so I stopped, and I was going to find out what that check engine light was. And I realized that I had grabbed the wrong bag. I had a diagnostic scanner in there for a GM, and I was driving a Chrysler. I had grabbed the wrong bag. They looked exactly alike, and I had put a little gray line on the bag that I needed, but I hadn't seen that. And it bothered me all the way to South Hill that light was on. And so I had to stop at Walmart and get a small little diagnostic scanner that I plugged in to find out what that was. And I found out what the issue was. It came back to a problem with the transmission. Oh, brother. And so I cut off the light, and that light did not come on again the rest of the trip and whatnot. And it still only comes on occasionally. I changed the transmission fluid in the filter, and that light will come on occasionally, about every 6 or 7 months, and I'll just cut it off because I don't want to have to deal with it, because the van is running just fine, and when it stops running fine, I'll deal with it then. But what about dummy lights? Emotions are our warning lights that say, hey, there's something important going on inside. Prop open the hood of your heart and check it out. Our emotions point to our goals, which in turn point to our beliefs. Emotions are a God-given means for discerning inner motivations and our thinking. So how our emotions are of value to us with Christ in the school of emotions. Often we're afraid of our emotions because we do not understand what is natural. The passage that we read, Mark 3 and verse 5, helps us because it describes even the emotional life of Christ. Let me read verse 5 again. And when he had looked around about them with anger, being grieved for the hardness of their hearts, he saith unto the men, stretch forth thine hand. And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored whole as the other. Now, if you will remember this instance, the people, the Pharisees, were upset at Christ because he healed this man on the Sabbath. And you were not supposed to work on the Sabbath. And they thought that Christ was working by healing that person. And I'll not get into that, and I'll not chase that rabbit trail. But when I was in Israel, sometimes on the Sabbath day, they have elevators in the hotels that stop on every floor because it is work for a person to push a button, and you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath. Go figure. That's not a problem. Just like what I told you, the air conditioner stopped working in my hotel room on a Sabbath day, and I called down to the desk and I said, I'm hot. And they said, well, it's a Sabbath day. We don't have anybody that will come to fix that until tomorrow. As I said, so I've got to be hot the rest of the day? They said, yeah. He said, you can open up the window and get the breeze that comes in, but we can't send anybody up to fix it. And they fixed it very quickly when it was no longer the Sabbath. About 7 p.m. on Saturday, the air conditioner came on. The Sabbath was over at 6 p.m. because their day goes from 6 to 6. So we will learn the value of emotions and what is natural. We read Mark 3:5. So he looked around with anger and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts. Do we realize that Christ himself had emotions? I told you the story when I was in college and seminary at Bible Jones University. There was a guy there that had gotten his undergraduate degree in psychology at Ohio State. And he came to Bob Jones University to get a doctor's degree. And he wrote his thesis on the emotional nature of Jesus Christ. I had never thought of that before. Just like verses that say Jesus wept. And now that guy is the head of the psychology department at Bob Jones University. His name is Greg Mazak. and he was a friend of mine then. He took the place of Dr. Fremont. When Dr. Fremont went to be with the Lord, and Dr. Fremont had Lou Gehrig's disease for about 20 years before he lost his life and went home to be with the Lord. So in this passage of Mark chapter 3, we learn that Jesus experienced strong emotions, even anger, but he utilized them correctly. The particular word that is here for anger has the sense of strong indignation and wrath. Just like our verse of the month, don't let the sun go down upon your wrath. I don't like going to bed when I'm angry about something because it keeps you from good sleep. There are times that I have been angry and I have gone to bed and I'll lay there for an hour or two thinking about the situation that made me wroth. Don't you like that word wroth instead of anger? But Christ showed anger. He experienced compassion, though, which is deep distress and grief at the hardness of people's hearts. So being angry, the Bible tells us to be angry and to sin not. It is not a sin to be angry about something, but don't sin in the process of that. I am angry that people will kill a baby before they're ever born, and they call it a choice or health care. It is not that. You are killing a child. But until you change a person's heart, you're still going to have that problem. And so we need to give the gospel to a person, and once they have accepted Christ, they will make different decisions. I guess that would have made Jesus angry as well, but he would sin not because he was perfect. He experienced compassion because of the hardness of people's heart. Shouldn't image bearers expect to experience strong emotions since Christ did? We don't deny them. We don't stuff them in a little bag that we forget. We experience them. We also learned that Jesus experienced a full range of both pleasant and painful emotions. He felt anger and compassion simultaneously. While being grieved, he felt intense anger. We too should expect to go through a full range of both pleasant and painful emotions. The lack of intense emotions has nothing to do with emotional maturity. Let's see how long this point is. I've got about two more points in this message, and it is already after 12 noon. Let me see if I can finish this up. How our emotions are a value to us, and what do we do with them? When an emotion comes, what do we do with it? We admit it, we acknowledge it to ourselves. Secondly, we identify with it and we label it accurately. We say things like, I'm hurt and angry. We courageously, thirdly, face and feel an emotion. It's a deep feeling that we feel. Are we bold enough to say, God, I'm mad at you? There are sometimes I have said that, God, I'm mad at you, and usually it's not him, it's me. And I need some correcting, but sometimes we need to be bold enough to deal with why we are angry at God himself. There's nothing wrong with expressing that and having God work in our hearts to work it out. Always share with God how you are feeling. When we're feeling an illegitimate emotion like hatred, confess it. Confessing the goals and beliefs behind our feelings. When we are feeling a legitimate emotion, we need to share it. What are legitimate emotions? Joy, sorrow. I have seen a lot, especially on social media, I'm sorry for your loss. does that person really feel that? But at least it helps a little bit to be sorry for a person's loss. Last week on social media, I saw a friend say, my father passed away. And a lot of people were saying, I'm sorry for your loss. That's good. There have been a lot of people posting that their child or somebody graduated from a course of study, either high school or college. And I've seen a lot of people posting, congratulations. That's a good emotion that we feel. Use an emotion to probe and examine our goals. And acknowledge emotion functions as a clue to our spiritual malfunction, just as an acknowledged physical symptom, just like a cancer warning sign. Usually when you have cancer warning signs, it's already too late. But I have talked with certain individuals that have started having some symptoms and the cancer was at stage 1. It's about the best that you can hope for. But still a person has emotions about that. Even a good thing can be misused or overused. Should we constantly probe or become compulsively introspective? There are some people that I've met that are always thinking about how they are feeling emotionally inside. No one in their right mind needs to be thinking about it all the time. They need to check under their hood for their car's status before every trip. You need to do that periodically just before you go on long trips. Check if you've got enough oil in the crankcase and things like that. If it's been a while, then change the oil before you go. So the same is true with emotions. When the light of intense emotion flashes, then check your goals and beliefs. The problem is checking too far, too infrequently. We tend to be afraid of our emotions. Check periodically and always check during times of extreme strong emotions. I've had people say, well, I don't want to go for this physical test because I don't want the doctor to find a problem. And so they are thinking, if I ignore a problem, then maybe it will go away. That can be a problem as well. There are times when I was young that if I would go to sleep, I wouldn't have to worry about those problems anymore. The problem is when you wake up, that problem still exists. And so let's not be like that. So what are the value of emotions to others? Jesus molded a cardinal principle of emotional maturity when he purposely expressed his feelings to others in order to have an opportunity to minister to them. He chose to look around with angry glances. Maybe in a commentary I did, he stopped and glanced at each one of them that he was angry at. So we need to answer these questions. How will expressing my feelings increase the potential for other person's growth? We have previously established a strong relationship with the person. There are times that I have said things to people that I have known well that I would not say to somebody that I didn't know well. Like what I've told you, that lady came up to me and told me that their Pope had just died. Please pray for the Pope. And I said, why? He's already dead. I knew that lady very, very well. And she began to laugh and whatnot. But somebody that I had just met that I didn't know very well, I would have never said something like that to them. But I realized that because I had known this person for a number of years and I was a good friend with them, that I could say that, and I used that as a witnessing opportunity. We believe sharing our feelings has the potential for healing a relationship. Sometimes when we talk out how we are feeling, it helps us with that relationship. We are under control enough to think through the previous criteria. We can govern the way we feel with the release of our emotion. Sometimes when we bottle things up, it becomes a problem, and we just need to talk it out. That's not always wrong. And so we need to understand the ABCs of being mature emotionally. And so I know that we have gone a little bit over time, but I wanted to finish this up since I would not be here this next week. So please pray for us as we travel. Let's have prayer. Our gracious Heavenly Father, thank you so much for helping us to understand that even you had an emotional nature, and you were angry at the people because of the hardness of their heart. Help us to realize that having emotions isn't always wrong. It is just how we deal with them that can become a problem. Help us to deal correctly. In Christ's name we ask it. Amen.